DC is just gridlock, grandstanding, and government red tape? Most people do. What if I told you this city is actually one of the most forward-thinking, fast-changing places in the country? From cutting-edge transit to green innovation, DC is rewriting its entire story. And the version you've got in your head is seriously outdated. You're not just a little wrong about DC, you're way off. Let me show you why. Let's kick things off with the biggest misconception about DC. That is nothing but nightmare traffic and those infamous broken metro escalators. Yeah, DC has transportation headaches like any big city. But if you're only focusing on traffic jams and metro delays, you're missing this crazy transformation happening right in front of us. Here's the mind blower. 37% of DC households don't even own a car. And no, it's not because they're broken. It's because tons of people just don't need one. The district has built one of the most diverse transportation ecosystems in America, where people have actual choices about how they get around. Beyond the metro, which, by the way, still moves hundreds, thousands of people daily despite its issues, DC has this massive bus network moving over 400,000 riders every day. The streetcar in 8th Street might not be huge, but it connects a ton of people to where they need to go. In Capital Bike Share, one of the first and most successful bike share programs anywhere, with over 5,000 bikes and hundreds of stations all over the region. DC's been going all in on protected bike lanes too, adding miles of new ones every year. These aren't just sad little painted lines that disappear on the parked cars. They're actually physical barriers that make biking way safer for everyone, from hardcore commuters to families with kids. But here's what's really game-changing. DC is embracing e-mobility like nobody's business. E-scooters and e-bikes aren't just tolerated here. They're actually built into the city's transportation plans. The city's found this sweet spot of regulations that let these new options thrive without turning sidewalks into chaos zones. And walkability, DC crushes it. The city consistently ranks amongst America's most walkable cities, with neighborhoods built for actual humans, not just cars. Tons of residents can grab groceries, hit a restaurant, chill at a park, and do most daily stuff within a 15-minute walk, a convenience that makes suburbanites jealous. Now, what's cool is how all these options work together. Your morning routine might look like this. Grab a Capital Bike Share to the metro, ride the train, and then walk a few blocks to work. Weekend errands? Maybe hop on a bus, snag a scooter, or use Zipcar when you need to haul something bulky back home. This mix and match approach isn't random. It's happening because planners are prioritizing moving people and not storing cars. The city's taking back street space from vehicles and giving it to humans, building parklets, widening sidewalks, and creating streets where pedestrians aren't treated like annoying afterthoughts. And despite what you'd expect, DC's transportation planning isn't trapped in political gridlock. DDOT's rolling out some seriously innovative stuff. Dedicated bus lanes during rush hour, traffic signals that prioritize buses, and smart parking prices that has transportation nerds drool. So next time someone moans about DC traffic, just remind them that thousands of residents are completely skipping that headache by using options that are faster, cheaper, and let's be honest, way more fun than sitting in bumper-to-bumper madness. Now, let's look at something many people misunderstand: DC's planning process. And before we go on, if you've made it this far, I'll take that as a good sign. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I post new videos every week about DC real estate, market trends, and fun things to check out around the city. Hold up, you're probably thinking, isn't DC planning process just as much a dumpster fire as everything else in Washington? Nope, dead wrong. While the feds do stick their noses into some parts of DC, the actual planning process is surprisingly smart, collaborative, and increasingly driven by real data and not politics. Planning in DC happens on multiple levels that actually talk to each other. Shocking, I know. The city's Office of Planning handles the big picture stuff that guides development. But what makes DC special is how the local planning flows into regional planning through organizations like the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, MWCOG for short. It says that. But through MWCOG, DC teams up with 24 local jurisdictions across Maryland and Virginia to tackle stuff that doesn't magically stop at city borders. Transportation, housing costs, environmental issues, emergency response, I mean, you name it. This regional approach means planning decisions aren't made in some isolated bubble, but consider how they'll affect the entire metro area. And look at transportation planning. The National Capital Region Transportation Planning Board works as the metro planning organization for the whole region. They predict future travel patterns, analyze what the region needs, and coordinate funding priorities across all the different jurisdictions. This is a big brain planning that most Americans don't even realize is happening. And it's going on every day, crossing political boundaries that usually seem impossible to bridge. bridge. And what's really cool is DC gets regular people involved in planning. Programs like Move DC don't just pretend to care about community input, they actually use what residents say to shape transportation planning. The latest Move DC plan had tons of community workshops, online feedback tools, and neighborhood meetings to make sure transportation investments actually match what communities need. And DC is getting super data savvy with its planning. I mean, they've installed counters all over the city to track pedestrian and bike traffic. They use this data not just for long-term planning, but for managing transportation networks in real time. I mean, this isn't your grandpa's city planning from the 1950s. It's 21st century urban management that uses tech to make smarter decisions. Maybe the most surprising thing is how DC planners use scenario-based forecasting. And instead of making rigid plans based only on what's happening today, they game out multiple possible futures, from changing work patterns to climate impacts. This flexible approach means the infrastructure they build stays useful even when conditions change dramatically. Is DC's planning process perfect? Absolutely not. But it's light years ahead of the stereotype of a broken bureaucracy stuck in endless, pointless meetings. It's a dynamic, data-driven system that other American cities are actually looking to for inspiration. All right, let's tackle another DC myth that just won't go away. DC's zoning is either impossibly strict or total Wild West chaos. Critics on one side whine that the city is strangled by height limits and preservation rules, while others freak out about developers bulldozing neighborhood character. The reality? DC's zoning system is way more flexible and constantly changing to keep up with what modern cities actually need. Let's get into what makes DC zoning different. Yeah, there are height limits. The famous Heights of Buildings Act caps building at roughly the width of the street plus 20 feet. But here's the thing, this hasn't killed density at all. It just shaped differently, creating this city of mid-rise neighborhoods instead of random skyscrapers poking up everywhere. DC completely rewrote its zoning code in 2016, first major update since 1958. That's almost 60 years. This wasn't some minor tweak. They basically reimagined how the whole city should grow. The new code has all these different zones: residential zones from single-family homes to row homes to apartments, commercial zones from small neighborhood shops to major downtown developments, and these mixed-use zones that create neighborhoods where you can actually live, work, and play without driving everywhere. What's pretty clever is how DC created special zones for specific priorities. They've got PDR zones, production, distribution, and repair, that protect space for makers and creative businesses. Downtown development zones mix office, shops, and housing in the city core. And special zones cover everything from waterfront areas to college campuses. The end result? A zoning system flexible enough to keep neighborhood character while still allowing the city to evolve. Like how they've made it way easier to build ADUs, those small backyard or basement apartments, in residential areas, adding housing without dramatically changing how the neighborhood looks. DC also has been experimenting with form-based codes in some neighborhoods, which care less about what happens inside buildings and more about how buildings relate to the street neighborhood. This approach helps create those walkable, human-scale places people actually want to spend time at. The key thing about DC zoning is not frozen in time. The Zoning Commission is constantly updating rules as needs change. Recent changes have cut parking requirements near transit, because who needs a parking space when you live next to a metro? Created more affordable housing opportunities and added incentives for green building practices. Perfect system? Oh no, definitely not. But zoning fights still break out, and there are legit debates about how fast the city should grow and where. But this idea that DC zoning is either completely rigid or free-for-all for developers just doesn't match what's actually happening on the ground. And now maybe the biggest misconception about DC is that it's isolated little federal bubble operating in its own world, and that couldn't be more wrong. Here's the thing, DC sits at the heart of this massive, interconnected metro area stretching across 2 states and a bunch of counties. What happens in the district impacts millions beyond its borders, and vice versa. You can't really get DC unless you understand the bigger regional picture. The Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments is where all this regional teamwork happens. Through this organization, DC collaborates with 24 local governments across Maryland and Virginia on everything from transportation and housing to climate change and public safety. And this isn't just getting together for coffee once a year. It's deep, ongoing regional planning that shapes daily life for everyone in the metro area. Think about transportation for a second. The metro doesn't just shuttle people around DC, it connects the entire region. The same goes for regional bus networks, bike trails, and major roads. Planning this stuff requires constant coordination across boundaries, which happens through the Transportation Planning Board under the MWCOG. Or look at environmental issues. The Potomac and Anacostia rivers don't really care about city limits. Water quality depends on what happens throughout the entire watershed. That's why DC works on regional restoration projects that stretch way beyond its borders. Even emergency response depends on regional teamwork. After 9/11, the whole National Capital Region developed coordinating emergency plans that pull together resources from DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And when big events like inaugurations happen, security and transportation planning involves dozens of agencies working across the region. Housing costs, probably the region's biggest headache, definitely needs a regional approach. When DC prices go up, it ripples throughout housing markets across the entire metro area. That's why the MWCOG has created regional housing targets that recognize you can't solve this problem one jurisdiction at a time. What's kind of amazing is how this regional cooperation keeps working despite political differences. DC, Maryland, and Virginia definitely don't always see eye to eye politically, but they still find ways to work together on stuff that matters to everyone. This practical approach happens under the radar exactly because it works so well. No drama, just results. The myth that DC operates alone isn't just wrong, it completely misses one of the city's biggest achievements, building regional institutions that actually work across political boundaries. In today's hyper-partisan world, the DC region offers a surprisingly effective model of practical cooperation that more people should be paying attention to. But it's time for our final one, and this one's all about the future of DC. The last big myth, and maybe the most stubborn one, is that DC is stuck in the past, just a city of old marble monuments and crumbling infrastructure that can't keep up with the times. But hang out in actual DC neighborhoods for like 5 minutes and you'll see a city that's going all in on innovation, sustainability, and making places where people actually want to live. Let's talk about sustainability first. DC has set one of the most ambitious climate goals in the country, hitting carbon neutral by 2050. And this isn't just empty PR talk. They're backing it with real policies. The district has this crazy aggressive renewable energy standard requiring 100% renewable electricity by 2032. There's the DC Green Bank helping fund clean energy projects. And any building over 50,000 square feet has to meet the tough energy performance standards that keep getting stricter. DC is crushing it on transportation innovation too. When other cities were freaking out about banning e-scooters and dockless bikes, DC was figuring out smart regulations to make them work. They're creating dedicated bus lanes to speed up transit, and they keep expanding protected bike lanes, including game changers like the K Street Transit Project. And let me tell you, the city's also becoming a leader in smart city tech. Check out Park DC. It uses demand-based pricing to manage parking way more efficiently. They've got smart streetlights cutting energy use while also providing connectivity for other tech. And DC's open data program makes city info available to developers and city tech nerds who build cool apps and make the city life better. And what really impresses me is how DC focuses on equity in its future planning. They recognize that urban planning has historically screwed over low-income communities and people of color. So they've created tools to evaluate the equity impacts of these major decisions. The Office of Planning Frameworks for Equity and Social Justice helps make sure future development benefits everyone, not just the already privileged. Public spaces are another area where DC is doing some really innovative stuff. The 11th Street Bridge Park, this elevated park they're planning across the Anacostia River, won't just be a cool place to hang out. It'll connect neighborhoods that have been divided for generations. The project has an equitable development plan to make sure nearby residents actually benefit from it instead of getting priced out. DC's approach to affordable housing shows this forward thinking too. The Housing Production Trust Fund helps create and preserve affordable units. Inclusionary zoning makes sure that new residential developments include affordable options. And community land trusts offer a way for permanent affordable home ownership in neighborhoods where prices are skyrocketing. And what stands out about DC's approach to the future is how it balances cool innovation with actual livability. The goal isn't just shiny tech for Instagram. It's about making life better for real people. This human-centered approach recognizes that cities exist for people, not just for economic growth or to show off the latest gadgets. DC faced huge challenges Sure, affordability is a major issue. Climate change threatens everything from flooding to killer heat waves, and the city's still dealing with historical inequities that won't disappear overnight. But the DC of today isn't just sitting around complaining about these problems. It's actively creating innovative solutions based on data, sustainability, and what communities actually want. That's not the DC story you usually hear, but it's the reality playing out in neighborhoods all across the city. The regional cooperation that happens daily through organizations like MWCOG, when they mention height limits, share how DC has created density and vibrant neighborhoods despite those constraints. And when they describe DC as stuck in the past, point them towards the innovative sustainability initiatives reshaping the city's future. One thing's for sure, Washington DC's old reputation is stuck in the past. If all you see is gridlock and monuments, you're missing the real story. This city isn't just a backdrop for politics. It's a dynamic, living place where culture, innovation, and everyday life collide. Think of it as a testing ground for the future of American cities. So if you really want to understand where cities are headed, look past the postcard and get to know the DC that most people never see. Thinking about moving to the DC area? My team and I would love to help you find your dream home. We've helped hundreds of families navigate the market, and you could be next. Just reach out to me at brian@coalitionpg.com or check the info in the description below. And before you go, don't miss the next video link right here. It dives into everything new coming to DC area and 2025. See you there.